This program is a production of Xenejenex, the healthcare communications companies, dedicated to enhancing the health of all Americans.
Oh, hi, I'm Dick Van Patten. A lot of you probably know me best for my role as the father on 8 is Enough. While I don't have 8 kids in real life, what a handful that would be, I do have 3 of my own. And I feel very strongly that while you can't control everything that happens to your kids, you can control some things. Now, as a dad, I want the reassurance, at the very least, that my house is safe. When I learned about radon, I was honestly concerned. Now, I'm sure a lot of people rationalize, especially in Los Angeles, boy, the smog alone will get you. But if you can minimize one controllable environmental hazard, well, why not do it? And as you'll see later on in this tape, I'm taking my own advice to heart.
Inside 8 million American homes, an invisible intruder lies waiting.
You can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it. There's something that creeps into your home, and that's invading your privacy.
Outside, the intruder poses no threat. It is everywhere, escaping from the earth, through the water, to the air we breathe.
You know, when I was hoping it would go away, I was thinking, well, if I leave all the windows open, it'll just go out into the air and it won't be a problem.
Once it infiltrates, the intruder sets a deadly trap.
Why should we wait for 10 or 20 years for more and more scientific health studies, for thousands and thousands more people to die before we take any action?
The intruder is radon.
We know that the radon problem is the single most important environmental pollutant that we're dealing with. And the reason that I'm saying that is that more people may die on an annual basis from exposure to radon than exposure to any other single pollutant.
We estimate that lifelong exposure to a radon concentration of 4 picocuries per liter of air has a risk equal to smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. Studies indicate that indoor exposure to radon may cause up to 20,000 lung cancer deaths a year. That's second only to smoking.
Whose house is filled with dangerously high levels of radon? Whose family is breathing the deadly gas? Well, no one can predict, but chances are 1 out of 3 that you and your family are being stalked by this invisible killer. That's why the United States Environmental Protection Agency now recommends that all homes be tested for radon. And that's why we're here, to help you. We'll show you how you can test to determine the radon risk in your home, how to interpret the results, and what you can do to ensure that you and your family will live radon-free. Every house contains some radon, no matter where it is located, how it's designed, or when it was built. Radon is constantly being emitted through the earth, from decaying rocks and soil. Usually the gas dissipates quickly in the vast volume of our atmosphere. But when it seeps into a house through cracks, floors, or foundations, the radon concentration can build to life-threatening proportions. Although scientists recognized the danger just a few years ago, the radon problem is really as old as the Earth itself.
Well, to understand what radon is, one has to go back to the precursor of radon, the thing which actually causes radon to be in the air, and that's uranium. Uranium is a natural element. It was formed when the Earth was formed billions of years ago, and it's in all rocks. It's in all soil, dirt. It's just naturally in the ground.
Uranium is also naturally radioactive. This radioactivity is generated when a uranium atom releases 2 protons and 2 neutrons from its atomic nucleus. Known as an alpha particle, this tiny, tightly bound cluster flies out from the uranium atom in a burst of energy. With this release of radiation, each uranium atom is transformed or eventually decays into radium, a different element. It takes 4.5 billion years for half of uranium's total number of atoms to decay into radium. It takes another 1,600 years for half of the radium atoms, which also form a solid, to decay radioactively to radon, a gas. And that is when the trouble begins.
The uranium and radium stay in the rock, but the radon, because it's a gas, is freed from the mineral structure of the rock and then can become part of the soil gas, the gas which exists in the pores of the rock, and if it migrates out of the rock can become part of the air in a house where they can become hazardous to the health of the occupants.
The higher the uranium content in a rock, the greater its radioactivity. And the higher the uranium content in the rock surrounding your house, the greater the probability that you have a radon risk.
There are three factors to keep in mind in judging how much radon will get into a house. The first is the source, that is how much uranium there is in the soil. The second is the pathway through the soil to the house, or the ease with which the radon that's produced in the soil can get into the house. And the third factor is the house itself, which creates a driving force for sucking the radon from the soil outside the house into the house where its occupants can be exposed.
We don't have enough information to predict each and every home that's going to have a problem. Through looking at geological characteristics of land, we can give some general ideas that, we know that there's certain kinds of rock formations here that may have more uranium or radium in them than would be normal. We can tell you that we think maybe 20% or 30% of the houses in this area are going to have high levels of radon, but we can't actually pinpoint which houses are the 20 or 30%.
One area in which radon risks are high is the Redding Prong, a geologic region consisting mostly of uranium-bearing granite that reaches from Reading, Pennsylvania, up through New Jersey and New York and into Connecticut. Environmental Protection Agency maps like this one highlight such potential radon hotspots. But according to the EPA, no home in any region should be considered safe.
The misconception that people have is, if my neighbor doesn't have it, I don't have it. Wrong.
In December 1984, the Watrous family of Boyertown, Pennsylvania, on the Redding Prong, got a house full of horror for Christmas. No one knew why Stanley Watrous had been setting off radiation detectors at Limerick Nuclear Power Plant where he works. Then one day, his worst fears were confirmed.
At that particular time, when that annunciator went off, it was almost like an annunciator went off in my head. I knew I was bringing it in from home, and obviously you don't think about yourself when you think about home. You think about the children and the wife.
According to tests, the radon levels inside the Watrous home were breathtaking, 1,000 times higher than the 4 picocuries per liter of air that was the Environmental Protection Agency's threshold for concern. Stan Watrous and his family had been living under a radioactive cloud.
Living in that radioactive cloud for 1 year, we have a 585% chance of getting lung cancer. That 1 year that we lived in our house was equivalent to smoking 220 packs of cigarettes every single day that we were here. We had enough radiation dose in that 1 year living in this house equal to 545,000 chest x-rays.
The significance of the Watrous findings were particularly important in that it enabled us to now see that high levels of radon were not just confined to contamination problems like we'd found in uranium mining in Colorado or phosphate processing in Florida. But when we found the Watrous home and saw that Watrous's levels were 100 times higher than we allow underground miners to work in, were probably well over 10 to 20 times higher than we'd ever seen in a house before in the United States, we realized then that this was a problem that was not just confined to contamination, but was applicable to just naturally occurring radon throughout the country.
The rocks and soil on which the Watrous house was built was the foundation for their radon problem.
Our house, like in most houses, major entry point is vertically through cracks in your slab. Also, another entry point we had, just like most people have, is your floor wall joint. Additionally, we had a very, very peculiar type of situation. Our source material was so intense on the outside of our block wall, and it was so close to the surface of our topsoil that when it rained, the rainwater actually adhered to the source material, pure radium. Pure radium came through the cracks in our mortar joints of our block wall.
Less than 2 weeks after the revelation, the family complied with a state request to leave their home. Only after Philadelphia Electric had invested $32,000 in research funds to rip out the sidewalk, demolish the slabs, remove the load-bearing walls, rebuild large sections of the house to be radon resistant, and install radon reduction technologies, were the Wattresses allowed to return. Years later, Stan and Diane Watress still monitor their radon levels daily.
But there's still times when, you know, it gets to me. I wish that I could go back and take that year away, at least from them, you know, I really do, so that they would not have that exposure. But it's something you have to live with and you have to deal with.
A lot of people ask us, Stanley, why didn't you sell the house? Stanley, can you ever sell a house? Stanley, what is the property value of that house? We would never sell this because we wouldn't do to somebody else something that we wouldn't want to have them do to us. We are assuming the worst case scenario and we're praying for the best.
The reason for Stan Watress's concern is the strong causal link that has been established between radon and lung cancer. That link was based on nearly 50 years of epidemiological studies of thousands of uranium and other hard rock miners in the United States, Canada, and Czechoslovakia. The underground miners studied had 5 to 10 times the incidence of lung cancer than the non-mining population. And that danger in the mines can now be extrapolated to the risk in homes.
We're adjusting the levels from a uranium mine to a home, and also we're adjusting other factors such as the breathing rate. For instance, we know that a uranium miner breathes a little bit faster than the average person. We're also adjusting the occupancy rate. You spend different hours on a daily basis in a uranium mine than you're spending in a home. So there have been a number of adjustments made to the uranium miners' data.
Laboratory studies show that radon itself is not what's hazardous to our health.
Radon itself is not dangerous. If you were to breathe radon, which is a gas, into your lungs, it would stay in your lungs for a few minutes, and then you'd breathe it out, and there really would be not a problem. There might be the odd radioactive decay occurring in your lungs, but the alpha particles that were formed wouldn't have enough range. They wouldn't be able to reach any part of your lungs that might be sensitive to radiation. They'd just deposit their energy in the air.
With this burst of energy, radon decays into a dangerous solid element called polonium.
Polonium, once it's formed by radioactive decay of radon, will attach itself to dust particles in the air. And it's these dust particles that we breathe in that cause the hazard. So these dust particles, which have radioactive polonium attached to them, get stuck to the surface of our lung, the inside surface of our lung. And it's when the polonium decays, while it's still attached to the surface of the lung, that there's a problem, because the alpha particles from this second decay, from the polonium decay, are right next to the lung. They don't have to travel any distance to reach the lung. They're already there.
Traveling at incredible speed, the sheer force of the alpha particles can damage the lung cells. Uncontrolled growth or cancer may be the result. The longer the exposure to radon and the higher the levels, the greater the lung cancer risk. Still, uncertainties remain.
We can never say with any certainty that a particular lung cancer was caused by radon, or anything else for that matter. Let us suppose, for example, and we hope it won't happen, that a member of the Watress family should contract lung cancer. We can still never say that this lung cancer was caused by radon. We can say that the chances were rather higher than usual that it was caused by radon, but that's as far as you could say.
What's more, the risk varies according to lifestyle, especially if you smoke.
The current health evidence we have is that people that are exposed to high levels of radon and are also smokers are getting a double whammy, if you will. They are at great risk. It's probably 10 times riskier for a smoker to be exposed to a specified level of radon than a non-smoker to be exposed to that same level of radon because of the potential synergism between those two pollutants.
Studies show children may also be more sensitive to radiation, and half the nation's schools may have at least one classroom with elevated levels of radioactive gas.
But what we're here for today is to talk about measuring radon.
The EPA is now recommending that all schools, as well as all homes, be tested for radon. Testing is the only way to determine your radon risk. Testing for radon is a simple, inexpensive procedure. It starts with a visit to your local hardware store or supermarket to buy a radon test kit. There are now more than 3,000 companies nationwide manufacturing the kits. So, how do you know that the company whose product you're purchasing is reputable and reliable? Well, look for it listed under the EPA's Radon Measurement Proficiency Program, a list that's available from your state radiation office. Then all you have to do is choose between an alpha track detector, which measures the radon in your home over a period of months, or a charcoal canister, a shorter term, less expensive test.
Well, we offer a charcoal canister, which would be a 4-day test. We'd send you the canister and you'd lift up the lid on it and just leave it exposed for 4 days and then seal it back up and return it to the lab, and we'll do an analysis on it and send you a report of the results.
For the initial radon screening test, the EPA recommends a charcoal canister like the one made by Teledyne Isotopes of New Jersey.
Charcoal has a property of absorbing radon. Charcoal is in the can, you open the can, the radon accumulates in the can. The can is closed after 2 to 7 days, depending on the design of the can, and the radon is trapped in the charcoal canister.
An accurate measurement, though not necessarily a representative sample, a charcoal canister offers a snapshot of your home's radon potential.
Clearly, radon levels vary in your home from day to day, from season to season. But most homeowners really want to get a quick idea. Gee, do I have a problem? That's why, for example, we say, if you're going to make a short-term test, if you want to get a quick idea what the radon level is in your house, do it under the worst conditions. The basement, windows and doors closed, generally in a cooler time of the year. We think that if you get a measurement then, okay, that you can have confidence that, you're not going to underestimate the average level throughout your house for a long period of time.
Dick Van Patten, who lives with his family in Southern California, decided to act on the EPA advice.
Even though California has one of the lowest radon levels in the country, you still can't predict with certainty whether your house will be the exception. And so my feeling was, why gamble the odds? Just test to know the answer for sure.
Following the test procedure isn't tough. Close your windows at least 12 hours before you begin, and then place the canister several feet above the ground at a breathable level. But creating the right test conditions in a climate like California's can be a little bit trickier.
There's no reason to be intimidated by testing. You see, what you're trying to do is create the worst case scenario for yourself, which would be the winter months when the windows are closed and the heat is on. The idea is to not let the gas escape by ventilating your house. Now, in California, you have to be a little more creative with that, since the weather tends to be more uniform year-round.
Like many other homes in the area, the Van Patten's house has no basement, so Dick placed a canister in several first-floor rooms instead. No matter where you live, everyone can and should test.
I figure at the very least, if people are contemplating selling their houses, they have a responsibility to test. I mean, people should know what they're buying. I wouldn't want that on my conscience.
Testing devices should be placed at breathing levels for best results, according to the instructions of the manufacturer. After the specified exposure time, you should return your test kit immediately to the company laboratory for analysis. At Teledyne, the canisters are logged on a computer and weighed to correct for any moisture the charcoal may have absorbed. A gamma ray detector then counts the energy emitted by radon decay products inside the canister. On a computer screen, the invisible intruder inside your home is revealed. Your radon test results indicate how quickly you should take action. The higher your radon exposure, the faster you should act. If your screening test indicates that the radon concentration in your house is greater than about 200 picocuries per liter of air, you should perform follow-up measurements immediately. Expose the new detectors in at least 2 lived-in areas of your house. Radon concentrations in this range are among the highest observed in homes. The EPA recommends that you take action to reduce this level within several weeks. If your screening test result is between about 20 and 200 picocuries per liter, you should also perform follow-up measurements, exposing detectors for no more than 3 months. Radon concentrations in this range are considered greatly above average for residences. The EPA recommends that you take action to reduce this level within several months. If your screening test result is between about 0 and 20 picocuries per liter, you should also perform follow-up measurements, exposing detectors for 1 year or for 1 week during each of the 4 seasons. Radon concentrations in this range are considered above average for residences. The EPA recommends that you take action to reduce this level within a few years. If your screening test result is 0 picocuries per liter, follow-up measurements are probably not required.
We believe that if you get a very low reading, 1 picocurie per liter, 2 picocuries per liter in your house, and you've tested it under what we would estimate as our worst case conditions, basement, windows and doors closed, cooler time of the year, you can be pretty confident that the average level throughout your house is not going to exceed 4 picocuries per liter.
But even 4 picocuries per liter, the EPA's past action level, is not a safe level of radon to have in your home. There is still an increased lung cancer risk. Living in a house with 4 picocuries per liter is like smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day.
The dilemma is it's certainly not a safe level. We do not want anybody to believe that 4 was established because there's no risk less than 4. There is some risk, and in many comparisons there is still a significant amount of risk. But the dilemma is as you get closer to the average level that there is in homes, and the average level in homes are probably about 1.5 picocuries per liter, it gets tougher and tougher and tougher to keep reducing it.
The goal of radon reduction methods, also known as mitigation or remediation, is to reduce indoor radon levels as close to 0 picocuries per liter as possible.
Although radon is a serious health risk, the one really good news piece associated with radon is that it's a fixable problem. Just about every home in America with the proper mitigation technique can be brought down to under 4 picocuries per liter, and some can even be brought down to 2 and 1. Fortunately, today, there is techniques available that for between maybe $500 to $2,000, you can bring a contractor in and get your house fixed. And if you're pretty handy yourself, for just a few $100s, you can do it yourself.
To reduce the radon levels in your home, start by sealing any cracks or holes in your basement. Radon seeks the path of least resistance. Any opening which touches the soil is a possible entry route. Cracks in concrete floors should be sealed using a non-toxic urethane sealant available at hardware stores. The area around supporting pipes, floor wall joints, and holes in basement walls should also be sealed closed using caulking or a urethane foam. And hollow cinder blocks used in the foundation of a house should be lined with newspaper and buttered off with a sealant made of concrete. These simple, inexpensive measures will reduce the flow of radon into most homes. But sealants age and new cracks form. It's almost impossible to find every opening. To cure a persistent radon problem, you may need professional help.
My husband's a chemist, so of course he knows what radon is, but the implications as far as living in a house with radon, we were totally unaware of. And so that was kind of a gradual process, finding out about it, going to the library, getting scared. And at first it was terribly upsetting because I thought of my children, then aged 6, 8, and 10, who had been spending the better part of every day in an environment that was the equivalent of smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day.
After months of denying she had a radon problem, Jan Sharpless called in Pelican Environmental Corporation of Massachusetts to mitigate. Pelican's first job is to diagnose the problem, a process that starts by confirming the existence of high radon levels in the living areas of a home.
And they vary between 8 and 20, which illustrates how radon varies by the minute, never mind by the day.
The team then moves downstairs to identify the radon source.
Randy, let's drill a hole in this part of the basement. The slab is certainly cracked, and I'd like to see what the material is underneath the slab. What we do if there's a basement, or obviously a slab on grade, is we look for a convenient point in which we can drill one suction hole to see what's underneath the basement slab. One of the first things I do is peer down it with my flashlight, and I will see a variety of things. I might see dirt, I hope not to see clay, I might see gravel, and I would love to see stone. And by stone I mean 3/4 inch or 3/8 inch aggregate.
Radon gas travels easily through stone before it's driven by air pressure into a house. Drilling a second hole into the basement slab will help to establish whether the stone in this house that brought the radon in can also help carry it away.
We put a suction on the first hole and suck through to the second hole, and I will check to see if smoke will go down the second hole, which will mean that at that distance from the first hole I am getting communication underneath the slab, which means that the material is sufficiently permeable for a sub-slab suction system to be effective.
Often a basement's hollow block wall is found to be a major radon conduit, and if it's suspected that water from an underground well also may be carrying the gas into a house and releasing it into the air as the water is used, the radon concentration here too would be measured. For the sharpless home, the diagnosis is complete, and a sub-slab suction system is recommended.
But what I'd like to discuss with you while we're down here is where to put the suction hole so that the pipe doesn't interfere. In my opinion, at present, the best method is to remove the radon from underneath the slab before it can get into the house, and obviously vent it to well above the roof line. So what we try and do is overcome that driving pressure that's driving radon into the basement by putting another pressure underneath the whole basement slab that will in fact suck the radon gas away, and then we vent it to above the roof line with a piping system and a fan either in the attic or above the eaves.
Like other radon reduction techniques, the sub-slab suction system changes the airflow inside a house. Air flows naturally from a high pressure to a low pressure region. Before mitigation, radon is sucked up from the ground through cracks and holes and into a house because the air pressure indoors is lower than the pressure outdoors, especially during the winter. Just opening your windows will help equalize this pressure difference and will eliminate some of the gas. But natural ventilation can also raise your utility bills and compromise your security. For this reason, forced ventilation using fans to draw outdoor air into a house and open windows on the adjacent or opposite wall to allow radon-laden air to exit is somewhat more practical. But a large volume of air must be forced into the house to produce a significant decrease in radon levels. The most effective mitigation techniques use fans and suction to reverse the pressure differences indoors and out. Which technique is recommended depends largely on your home's construction. If your home has hollow cinder block walls through which radon travels, pipes may be inserted in each wall and attached to an outdoor suction fan to create a low-pressure region around the house. And if, like the sharpless home, your house sits on a bed of crushed stone, sub-slab suction is likely to be the technique of choice. Properly installed, these methods can each reduce the radon level in your home nearly 100%. Sometimes, more than one radon reduction method is needed.
Because you have a furnace in your basement, in winter, and your furnace kicking, when it kicks on, I'd like to know that we couldn't have any possibility of backdrafting. So we've put in a separate vent to the furnace area so that the furnace can draw on fresh air. That is just a good precaution when one puts in a sub-slab suction system.
Always, a homeowner should retest for radon after mitigation work is completed.
And if somebody is concerned enough about spending money to go out and test their structure, concerned enough about spending the money to fix their house, they should know that the levels do change. My advice to the normal homeowner would be test, retest, and test over, period.
Too few of us have taken Stanley Watrous' advice. Some new houses are being built radon resistant. using design features that will also make them more structurally sound and energy efficient. Radon testing is often included in real estate transactions, but far more often, homeowners ignore the intruder in their midst.
The key problem that I see is that people can't see or smell or taste radon, so they don't know it's in their house. Home is not perceived as a particularly risky place by people. It's home sweet home, you know? You go there to get away from the nuclear power plant or the hazardous waste site or the thing that you may otherwise perceive as being risky, even though it may not be anywhere near as risky as your house. And I've told many people that if I could make radon, a house with elevated levels of radon smell like sweaty socks, then I could get people to test and do something about it.
In our recent rush to consider the state of our country's environment, we often overlook those problems closest, those that affect our homes. Living radon-free is a commitment, part of the attention we must pay to our surroundings, to our families.
The lesson that we have learned as a country, as a nation, is that the radon problem is a problem that we can fix. It's a problem that we can very successfully address at a very low cost.
Well, I hope you got as much out of participating in this tape as I did. Now do yourself a favor. Watch it again and again as you go through the process of testing and eliminating radon from your home. Share it with family and friends. I also want to thank Xenejenex and the Environmental Protection Agency for their valuable assistance in this program.
This program has been a production of Xenejenex, the healthcare communications companies.